Book 6, The History. Joshua, Conquest of Canaan, and God's Faithfulness Revealed. Chapters 1 to 5, Preparation to enter the Promised Land, including crossing the Jordan River. Chapters 6 to 12, The Conquest of Canaan, including the fall of Jericho and other military victories. 13 to 22, Division of the land among the tribes of Israel. 23 to 24, Joshua's farewell address and the renewal of the covenant with God. Joshua, the leader of the Israelites after Moses, tasked with leading the people into the promised land. Rahab, the Canaanite woman who hid Israelite spies and became part of God's people. The Israelites, people of Israel following Joshua in the conquest of Canaan. God's faithfulness. Joshua emphasizes that God keeps his promises, particularly in his promises to give Israel the land of Canaan. Obedience to God. The success of Israel's conquest is tied to their obedience to God's commands. Courage and strength. Repeated calls to be strong and courageous in the face of overwhelming challenges. Judgment and mercy. The destruction of Canaanite cities illustrates God's judgment, while the salvation of Rahab shows his mercy. Symbolism. The promised land symbolizes God's faithfulness and the fulfillment of the covenant promises. The Jordan River represents the boundary between the wilderness and the full fulfillment of God's promises, as well as a metaphor for spiritual renewal. Walls of Jericho represent human barriers as opposition that can only be overcome through God's power. Practical application. Trusting God's promises. Joshua's story encourages believers to trust that God will fulfill his promises, no matter how daunting the obstacles. Courage and obedience. In times of challenge or uncertainty, God's call to be strong and courageous and to obey his guidance remains relevant. Commitment to God. Joshua's declaration to serve the Lord challenges believers to make a conscious, active commitment to follow God in all aspects of life. The original audience was the people of Israel, both the generation that conquered Canaan and future generations who would need to remember God's faithfulness and their covenant obligations. The book of Joshua was written by Joshua. The events in Joshua likely took place around 1400 BC, with the book itself being written sometime after these events.